Hey everyone, I'm Scott Cunningham, aka Scottsy Business, and today we're here with Gabriel Rene, who is the CEO of Versus.io. If you'd like to start off just by introducing yourself, that'd be awesome.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. So how busy is your day on an average day working at Versus?
Well, there's only 24 hours in the day, so I work about 25 of them.
Yeah.
So fairly busy. Yeah, it's like any startup, it's full time plus overtime plus anytime type of work.
Yeah, fair enough. So I guess can you give us a brief introduction to Versus and what it's all about?
Yeah, so we feel that the convergence of exponential technologies in the 21st century, but really kicking off in 2020 here, is the key disruptive transformation of the century, and will disrupt every single category of industry and business and the way we live, work, and play. So when you look at that convergence and the ingredients, you're looking at certainly AI, but also artificial intelligence and as artificial intelligence, but then also augmented reality and virtual reality, Internet of Things and sensors and beacons and robotics, and then blockchains and cryptocurrencies and other forms of digital transactions. And then going a little further down, of course, we get into some even more sci-fi stuff like biotech and quantum computing. But if you look at those as a whole, they're all converging in different ways. The things that we wear, the way that we're interacting with technology, through voice, through gesture, facial recognition, computer vision, and then the automation of contracts, the way that smart contracts are enabling that, the sort of data layer of a new sort of trust at the data layer, more intelligence at the logic layer, and new, holographic data sets at the interface layer are creating a new web. And so we call that Web 3.0, meaning all three elements of the stack, but connected through a new type of protocol, which we've developed at Versus, which is called the HSTP protocol. So instead of the hypertext transfer protocol, which is what the World Wide Web has been developed on, more or less a way of interactive pages connect with each other. All of these interactions are about spatial interactions. Even when we call the different types of computing decentralized computing or distributed computing with edge or blockchain, spatial computing, which is AR and VR, ubiquitous AI, IoT is doing computing all around us. This trend is really about computing being in the world around us and not behind screens or merely computers sending messages back and forth to each other. So what we've done at Versus, we've developed this new structure, a new sort of set of protocols that allow all of those different technologies to form networks and to be able to communicate together, to enable coordination between humans, machines, and AI, and to enable collaboration between different organizations and groups, within supply chains, across, the smart cities of the future, and ultimately the world. And so that's what we're dedicated to developing. We've now tested these core protocols. We have a number of early sort of alpha partners moving into beta at the end of this year, and then we're planning on the global public launch probably sometime next summer.
That's awesome. And we were just talking earlier. I had met your team about a year ago at Futurist. Would you just like to share some of the updates that have happened since then?
Yeah, I think most importantly, we have launched the Spatial Web Foundation as its own nonprofit, and Versus was then formed after Futurist as a for-profit company, kind of in the spirit of Linux and Red Hat, where you've got a nonprofit where the core protocols are being held, and then you've got a for-profit entity that's building applications and doing integrations and monetizing that and helping to really drive adoption in the process.
Yeah, awesome. So you mentioned previously that you wrote a book called The Spatial Web. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the Spatial Web just came out in September 2019, so about a month and a half ago. It's been #1 bestseller within a few days, and it's been trending as a #1 bestseller in the computer and technology section on Amazon.
That's awesome.
Thank you. The title of the book is How Web 3.0 Connects Humans, Machines, and AI to Transform the World. So it's really about this idea that most of our stories of the future when it comes to these kinds of sci-fi technologies are like dystopic tales that are all in tears. kind of.
Yeah.
The power of these technologies overwhelming us and us overwhelming each other. And it's always sort of, either a sort of a robotic invasion or the AI taking over or people using these technologies to destroy the world. And so we don't have very good stories about our future as a race. But we also don't have ways of looking at the future in ways that solve the challenges we're facing today with our technologies. So if we look at the last 100 years of technological development, amongst all the amazing productivity and health benefits and societal benefits at scale and all of the luxuries that we enjoy, we've also arguably brought ourselves to the point of species extinction. And so many of those effects, whether they were from the industrial era or the fallout from the digital transformation era, like in Web 2.0, where we're dealing with, privacy invasion and surveillance capitalism and hacks of all different sizes and stripes, and the abuse of these data sets for basically to sell to advertisers that then are able to manipulate us emotionally. And then even ultimately, as we've seen our elections, those are all the result of a lack of thinking about the potential negative effects of our technologies. We tend to think about the positive effects of our technologies and only think of those. We didn't build privacy, into the web. We didn't build security into the web. It was much later that we were able to add and get adoption for something like HTTPS. This is one of the reasons why I think blockchain emerged, because the trust layer of the web was actually missing, and even worse, became something that could be monetized and we could be exploited by. So now when you say artificial intelligence, robotics, holographic information, digital twins, and like how much more powerful are those technologies, and what will the impact be 100 years from now? So what the book tries to cover is lay out a foundation for how we build a new kind of a web in the 21st century that has trust, interoperability, privacy, and security by default, by design, into the protocol layer itself. But then all the various applications that are built on top of it, much like we've seen the last 30 years of the web, can take those into consideration and sort of avoid this dystopic sci-fi future from one that maybe works much better. And we use those technologies to reverse some of the challenges that have come from the fallout of the last 100 years of our development, and use them to propel us forward into what we would hope would be, for the first time, a globally networked civilization that works together for everybody.
Yeah. Wow. So guys and girls, you got to go get that book and see what's up for yourself. And Amazon bestseller. So clearly it's got something in there for everyone. So how was the idea for Versus originally formed, or like what was the motivation behind starting Versus?
So I started working at a company, sort of an advanced R&D lab back in the 90s, more or less out of high school, called CyberLab. And CyberLab worked on a lot of early augmented and virtual reality projects, early database design stuff for Human Genome Project, as an example. A lot of projects with different governments and large nonprofits, UNESCO and United Nations projects. And we worked with many of the largest companies: Apple, Intel, Microsoft, Google, Yahoo. And then as the web was emerging in the sort of mid-90s, culturally, there was the whole concept of cyberpunk. And cyberpunk was a sort of 80s and then 90s sci-fi techno geek cultural phenomena that, based on a lot of science fiction novels that had come out in that era, that described a network civilizations, often in dystopic terms. Blade Runner is a great example. The Matrix is a great example. There were other films of that era, like Johnny Mnemonic and The Lawnmower Man, and not all of these are like the greatest cinema in the world. But the thing that's common to many of them is that they describe a world where robots and humans and holographic information and a sort of three-dimensional version of the web is what everyone's immersed in. Everyone's connected to the network. And so even as the web was becoming a real thing for the first time on top of the internet itself, we already thought, well, this is going to end up being a physical network, and it's going to be holographic data, and it's going to be a 3D web in the world. And virtual reality will allow you to go in and out of different imaginary worlds, and every movie and every book and every story, instead of being something you experience on the screen, will be something that you are immersed in and can interact with. Like the holodeck on Star Trek. So all these ideas come out of science fiction, like much of our greatest technology, and we, over many, many years, while working on various different projects that touched on these technologies, whether it's AR, VR, AI, or mobile networks and mobile devices, and which became becoming Internet of Things and wearable technologies, and then e-commerce, how e-commerce sort of worked on the web. All of that leading up to about 3 years ago, seeing this opportunity where many of these technologies were going to converge. And the key ingredient there was that blockchain had emerged as this new way of enabling trusted data sets. Now, if you can't trust what your eyes see, if you're on the holodeck in Star Trek and you can't trust what your eyes see, how will you know what's accurate or what's real in terms of any sort? If the data is not merely numbers on a screen, but is like a holographic projection or even haptic where you can feel something, whether you're jacked in like Elon Musk's Neuralace company and a number of others that are doing human computer brain interfacing, contact lenses. I mean, there's fast forward 20, 30 years from now, and those sci-fi ideas are not so sci-fi anymore. Far more common than we. So blockchain really enabled a new possibility around two things. One, creating digital scarcity, which the web and digitization had created digital abundance, but that had driven the value of everything to effectively to zero or towards zero. Digital scarcity meant that the uniqueness of any digital asset, which could be like, for example, a perfect one-to-one holographic projection of Gabriel talking to Scott, driven by an AI using Google Duplex for my voice. Like, maybe this is me, maybe this isn't me, right? Right now, we're interfacing through Skype. I look pretty realistic. You look pretty realistic, but we've never met. I don't actually know. So let's fast forward and meeting in an immersive environment, 15 years from now. We've been doing R&D long enough. I can tell you that it would be impossible to be able to tell. We've seen the precursors of this with things like deepfakes, which basically costs a couple of pennies, and any college kid can stick your face on anything, right? So now that becomes fully holographic, it becomes hyper real, like the best video game. We've gone from Pac-Man to League of Legends. Or even more hyper real video games with real time interactivity with hundreds of thousands and millions of people interacting simultaneously. We will drive past the point of what's considered the uncanny valley, or the reality singularity, I like to call it, where we're not going to be able to tell. Well, blockchain suddenly enables us to have a way to verify beyond our senses what data sets are real, no matter how they're being represented. And that opened up a window to start thinking about the possibility of Web 3.0 becoming this sort of what we used to call the metaverse, which now we call the spatial web, where all these technologies can converge, and we can have these amazing immersive experiences, and IoT devices and robotics can all talk to each other, and AIs can coordinate, and we can interact with holographic information, but suddenly you could trust which IoT device registered to which company, which camera is being turned on and where did this holographic information come from, the provenance of experience, could suddenly become valid. And in fact, might possibly be one of the more important challenges to solve in the 21st century, if in fact these other technologies are advancing so fast. Blockchain suddenly became the almost like the adult in the room that would help us to bridle this horse. So it's not just running us right off the cliff, and it's something we can actually control and direct.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the next big updates in the works for Verses? Like, what are we going to see in the next 6 months or so?
So we're targeting a large symposium for Q1 of next year. We'll be demonstrating a number of functional demos around applications for supply chain and for retail and for entertainment and for smart cities, with a number of different partners. And then we'll also be releasing technical information. We're going to enable people to sign up for the beta. And all that leads up then, I think, to the larger global public release sometime in Q2. So that's where our focus is at the moment. Meanwhile, Versus is doing a number of different development projects for various partners. A lot of it focused in supply chain and logistics, where we need both sort of, you really want provenance that might be related to blockchain, but you also need the benefits of performance increases that happen when you suddenly allow people to access holographic information. You can imagine a warehouse picker moving through a warehouse trying to find a box. Right now, they kind of look at a series of numbers, and then they look at the numbers on the screen. They try to find the box in three-dimensional space. And they take it and they go put it at the drop-off location. So we're developing applications to help warehouse workers be able to route themselves through these 1 million square foot warehouses, which speeds up productivity. We're working on a number of projects right now with a number of universities, some around climate credit accounting. There's a number of smart city projects that we're also co-developing with a number of partners, and we'll be revealing who those people are and what those projects are in the coming months.
Awesome. I'm interested to see maybe like something to help navigate people through like grocery stores or like like just retail consumption and being able to find the products that you're looking for. I think that'd be really, really interesting. So what is it going to look like in like a bit of a longer term? Like, what is the vision for the next 2 years to 5 years for Versus, like in the most ideal sense? Because obviously it's hard to see that far into the future with how fast everything's changing. But I guess just like in an ideal world, what would that look like?
Well, there's two different branches to the strategy. So one is that the Spatial Web Foundation is focused on driving awareness and adoption. So more awareness and more adoption. So working with other standards bodies and organizations, working with governments, working with policymakers, and building out developer tools and developer communities that can really start to drive their own use cases and applications and supporting those. And then on the lab side of the house, our focus is building applications and integrations so that large organizations, large corporations, and governments can start to integrate these technologies at scale. So these are like the most practical, boring applications that you can come up with. How to manage ports, how to manage fleets of trucks, how to manage warehouses, how to manage supply chain, how to manage energy grids, and gas and electric, and then kind of even at the same time considerations around climate and impact at scale, and government sort of policies, land title registrations, all these things that are very much sort of infrastructure related. That's our core focus there. So the two go hand in hand because this shows the viability and applicability of the core technologies in large use cases. And then the foundation's focus is really a little more top down in terms of driving influence, but also bottom up with respect to supporting developer communities for more organic development.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. Do you find that like Are there any other projects doing this, or do you guys find that you are pretty much the one of the most unique like people in this space right now, or is there anything else? Or is there any other projects doing something similar? How does Versus fit in with that?
Um, there isn't anyone doing what we're doing. Everyone's working on something that tends to be focused on an industry. So it's like a technology focus on an industry. So take a technology, it's like there are people focused on blockchain. There are people focused on spatial computing. There are people focused on artificial intelligence. There's people focused on IoT. In some rare cases, you get one plus the other one, like blockchain for IoT, right? Or you get blockchain for VR. So you get something like Decentraland, right? IoT plus blockchain, sort of IOTA, right? And there's a handful of examples like that. I don't know if any of them's gotten great traction yet, but I think that they're important steps in the right direction. We're not any of those technologies. We're literally a protocol designed to connect those technologies. So the World Wide Web is not a computing technology. It's not a it's not a storage technology. It's really a protocol designed to connect. In this case, certain types of computers, but fundamentally enabling content linking between pages. So we've developed a new HSTP, hyperspace transaction protocol, to enable interactions and transactions in space. It's really moving the idea of a web from something behind a screen that is about sharing, like automating the sharing of information, to automating interactions in the world. So there isn't anyone else going for this, in part because maybe they just weren't cyberpunk geeks from the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big undertaking, and you guys are really like building out the foundation for anyone else to come and then start to try to build on top of that.
Yeah, thank you.
So do you have like a current user base, or is that going to be in the future when it launches?
We don't have a user base because we're not a consumer facing. It's not user facing. It's for developers to develop things on top of, right?
Okay,
so
yeah,
I
that
suppose
makes sense.
those users, there are users that are more like partners that we're working with that are developing applications, and they're very targeted for different industries, and so that we're able to showcase certain technologies, which again we'll be able to share at our symposium in Q1. But it's very much the opposite of the sort of ICO blockchain protocol approach to the market, where let's write a white paper, then we'll do a token sale, then we'll use the tokens to develop the technology, then we'll get people to start building on top of it, and then they'll start building dApps, and then users will come. And I think, if we're being honest, I haven't looked at the most recent numbers, but I don't know if there's any successful dApp today of any kind. It's probably, if you take the top 10 most successful dApps, they're probably at the very, very bottom of the list of apps in Apple's App Store or the Android App Store in terms of use case. Hundreds or maybe several thousand users, right? So I think that even something really successful or considerably successful or arguably successful like Ethereum hasn't driven a lot of actual applications. And as a result, there are hardly any users. The vast majority of all users right now using blockchain are playing games or playing poker, right? So blockchain as a philosophy in 2018 has been a commercial failure in 2019. But that's not a great indication of the success of the technology. I think that over the next several years, we're going to start to see these various applications. Even the tests that we're seeing in commercial, like large scale commercial deployments, a lot of which are around supply chain, have not been wildly successful, and many of them are still in process, and we don't have that data. So the world is still out on blockchain. What is it exactly that it's good for, and how is it able to be used? But I would argue that the world is also not bought into Internet of Things yet. I don't think that it's bought into augmented or virtual reality. It's not bought into artificial intelligence. Like, all of these technologies are nascent and new, but our argument is that they actually are correlated and go together. There people, 10 plus years ago trying to describe why the cloud was important. McDonald's, when McDonald's was approached to get McDonald's.com, they were like, "This is useless. What do we need this for?" 2 years later, they bought it for $3 million.
Yep.
So these technologies have to prove themselves out, and the markets have to emerge. But I don't look at users as a metric for success for us right now, in part because I don't think the market's ripe enough to use that metric. Instead, what I look at is the scale of interest and demand that we're getting from large organizations and governments and institutions that have problems that need a multi-tiered solution, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
That's the lens that we're looking for.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Is your team planning to attend any conferences? I know you said in Q1 you have the symposium. Are you going to be attending any conferences over the next year that you want to let anyone know about in advance to make sure that they'll show up?
Yeah, thank you. We don't have anything planned right now. 2017 and 2018 was filled with so many conferences all around the world, which was great. We met a lot of wonderful people, and we got to meet, participate in the community. And I think around this movement, a lot of it which was focused on sort of crypto events and blockchain events. And since we attend events that are AI and VR related and IoT related and smart city related, however, we have no plans between now and our symposium in Q1, mainly because we're coming into the end of the year here, and we're very focused on kind of what do we now need to give to present. So, please come to the spatialweb.org, fill out, send us your email. We'll make sure we keep in touch, or come to versus.io, same thing. And we'll be doing a live broadcast of the symposium, and we'll be making a lot of materials available for everyone at that point. So no matter where you are, you don't have to meet us in Beijing or Tokyo or New York or Vancouver or Toronto or LA. You can meet us online, and we think that that's probably the best way to create the content, share it with everybody, and then be able to chop that up in little pieces, and then come back on with people like you and talk about what we think went well at the symposium, and get your feedback and your community's feedback as well. So no plans for all of our future events at the moment are all taking place in cyberspace.
Yeah, that's what makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The natural progression of things. So where can everyone go to learn about this? You just mentioned a couple of the two websites, but if you just want to mention them again for anyone who wants to go check those out.
Yeah, so please come check us out at thespatialweb.org. The site's just gone up, so bear with us. It doesn't have high levels of detailed information, but give us your email. We'll stay in touch. You can also visit us at versus.io. And you can go to Amazon if you'd like to learn more about this and look up the Spatial Web. It's written by myself, Gabriel Rene, and my partner, Dan Mapes. And you can follow me at Twitter at greal1111. I post a lot of weird stuff related to all these emerging technologies. Those are the cyber handle locations for now. And one day, hopefully we'll be doing this whole type of interview in the Spatial Web itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So everyone, make sure to go and check that out. Make sure to check out the book if you want to learn more. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we end this off?
Just that I appreciate everything you're doing, Scott. And I think this is what makes the world go round. It's people sharing their ideas with each other. So thanks for bringing me on today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for coming on. I think since you guys are doing such a unique project, I think it's really awesome to be able to share that with the audience and give them some more insight so that they can look forward and definitely check out the symposium in Q1 of next year for sure. So again, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome. And I wish you all the best with your projects.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.